All right, this is Clint of Doorwayto, hanging out with a couple of folks, actually a new face this time and versus the last time with Gutvoid. First of all, let's make it simple for people that have not watched the last interview. Both of you kind of tell a little bit about yourself and what you do.
All right, I can start. I'm Brendan. I do guitar and vocals in Gutvoid, and I was in that last interview way back in 2019, I want to say.
It was 2019, 2020. It was a while ago, man.
You wanted to interview Gutvoid that long ago? Holy smokes.
Dennis, what do you do, my friend?
I'm Dennis, and I play drums.
There you go. Easy enough. All right. So I'm going to jump in right to the really tough questions first. They're not that tough, but you know what I mean. So why just 4 songs after 2 years? You hurt my heart a little bit by just giving me 31 minutes of music. Why just these 4 songs?
So I guess, Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong. When we were thinking about the next stuff to release, we had some material, but then I think I threw the idea of doing an EP before doing an album, just so that because we had a few ideas, but like we're all kind of busy, and so things weren't flowing as quickly. So that maybe an EP would be cool. We could do, we started with an EP, then we have an album. EPs are good to try something different, experiment a little bit. And so we thought maybe it'd be cool to do that. And then, buy us a bit more time for the album, which will be, more than 4 songs in 31 minutes. Because we can't write short songs. But I think it was that. And kind of with that idea, I was like, oh yeah, we could, as I'm sure we'll get into more, kind of experiment with taking our influences and the things that kind of we draw inspiration from when writing, and kind of flesh them out into 4 kind of still Gutvoid but more distinct songs. So that was kind of the idea, at least from my memory, of why kind of we went the EP route rather than just another LP right after.
Cool. Dennis, you got anything for that? Or
I'm personally a fan of EPs. I love 20 to 30 minutes of all killer, no filler, I feel like there's been a lot of death metal bands sort of historically and presently who use the EP, like Brendan was saying, sort of as like transitional things. So if you're going to try something new and you're like, let's maybe have it as a, something en route to an arrival of a new record with a somewhat new sound. We're not reinventing ourselves or anything, but taking new approaches and things. I mean, there's been a lot of great death metal and metal EPs sort of over the years, and I'm into that. I love that.
Well, no, absolutely, I agree. And I mean, you are wearing an Unsane shirt, probably one of the most to the point, briefest bands possible. They have 17-minute long albums. Let's be honest.
Love it.
So anyway, no, that's cool. So I'm going to ask both of you, because I'd love to get the perspective from both sides. From the last record in 2022 to now, how do you see the band's songwriting and sounds different versus the full length and the new EP?
Do you want to start with this one, Dennis?
I mean, I feel like this is such a cliche answer, but I feel like the band is becoming more itself, when Gutvoid started, it was Brendan and Dan. And then, Justin and I joined after the first album was basically written, after the demo EP was already recorded. So it's of course we had input, it's we changed our parts and we changed feels and stuff, but it's the structures and things and sort of the way the songs, the aesthetic of the album, the direction of the album was already set. And then, after we started playing these songs live, and after we recorded them and after we started playing them live, I think I feel like Brendan and Dan are writing with us in mind a little bit. Maybe I'm thinking of myself too highly here, but it's our group chat, as I'm sure most bands group chats, it's we're sharing songs all the time, and we're talking about records we love, and it's we get a feel of what kind of bands we have in common and things like that. And yeah, so it's he'll we'll have certain things in mind. It's our strengths and weaknesses that you can kind of play to, and I think that allows us to bring in different influences while still being Gutvoid at the same time.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally right. Like anytime, especially now going forward, like, again, like as Dennis said, like playing with you for now the number of years and like kind of knowing your style and knowing kind of like the things that we share in common with respect to like song structure or bands and stuff like that or style has definitely influenced like the songs and like parts and like, oh, I think this would be a good part to, I mean, as Dennis, I'm like, here's a part you can just go nuts and do like a drum solo here, and like I know like, oh, like odd time signatures, I know you're into that, so I can just throw that at you and not worry. Like to kind of go against, Den's wearing an Unsane shirt, I'm wearing a Symphony X shirt. So I mean, but like it's true. I think as cliche as it is, I think it really is. We're starting to kind of find our own sound, which is a bit. I mean, it's still definitely steeped in the original influences that kind of drove the EP and the album, which are like the death doom stuff, like the the Finnish death metal and now the American kind of death doom bands like Mortiferum and like Cathilist here in Canada, but also being a lot more both comfortable, but also kind of feeling what's the word I'm looking for, like allowing ourselves to kind of bring in other influences like the prog stuff, because we're all prog to some extent.
We'll get into that later on.
Oh, excellent, great.
Yeah,
we're talking two prog nerds here, so perfect.
Yeah, we'll get into that later on. No, thanks, I appreciate it. So the reason why I wanted to talk to you guys about this EP particularly is I agree with everything you're saying, and it's kind of going to go into the next question, what you just said. I feel like there's a comfort here now where earlier on it was awesome because you could feel like people feeling things out. Like you could feel that like, okay, maybe this isn't the most perfect song, but it's our song and we're putting it out just the way it is. I almost feel like now you can hear who's playing what's doing what, and like where the flow of the song's going. And I love that kind of spatial doomy tone now mixed with the prog and the death metal that you hear on this EP for the very first time. Like where other songs would be, okay, this is the proggy doom song, this is the proggy death song, or this is the death doom song. These four songs kind of incorporate it all. But was it hard to kind of give the denseness that you still have and that you're doing now and making it experimental or making it sound different on each song?
Like I guess so. In a way, yes and no. I think to go with the no, I think it kind of was just like naturally came about, like, oh, here are the things that we were writing, and like started writing one, like, yeah, like let's lean a bit more into the prog, like when the Living Dome opens is like that has like a mid prog section that's like all instrumental with a bunch of different time signatures and solos, 2 guitar solos and a drum solo, and most of it's in like 7/4 time. Like it's very without getting yelled at, like Dream Theater is a big influence on that. Like like their song structure, like they'll have a bunch of stuff leading up to kind of an instrumental section that's a little wild, and or even like Symphony X, same thing. Like specific earlier Symphony X was like that, and those two were definite influences on that track. So it's like great, we get to like naturally it's coming about that way. But in another way, it was a little tricky to like make it weave and kind of be cohesive, because initially when we went out for this, it was like, okay, well, let's have like 4 songs that show highlight our influences a bit more on the nose than say other tracks that we had, like on the album, like The One Who Dwells is like, it's like kind of a longer proggier track, but it's still like really like steeped in like that death doom sound, where the maybe the equivalent on this EP, which is like Swamp Consumed, is like it's much more like you hear the like, okay, this is definitely like Crypt's Morbid Angel, like some like From Wisdom to Hate era Gorguts influence there. That's like, it's like kind of steeped in that style. But despite that, we were like, well, we still want it to sound like us. We want it to sound like 4 different bands who are doing, these songs. It was like, no, we want like, it's kind of Gutvoid, just purposely making this one a little bit more death doomy and this one a little bit more proggy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know it's kind of like a wishy-washy answer, but in some ways it flowed naturally, but others it was kind of tough because we had to like really be conscientious of, well, we got to make it tying together. We want to make it an EP that's ours, not just here's 4 random songs. I don't know, Dennis, if from your perspective, like if you feel the same or.
Yeah, I was going to say for me, learning the songs, also just a little bit about the process of writing this EP, which was similar to the first one in that Brendan and Dan had most of the parts written, and then they would send them to me and Justin, and we would start to like work them on our own, and then we'd come together and work it out and change a few things and tweak this and that. But learning the songs this time around, even though I would say they're more complex than the album, it was a lot easier for me just because I was so much more inside Brendan's head at this point. I'm like, before it's like, okay, this song is 8 minutes long. Why is it 8 minutes long? Like, what's going on? And now I'm like, oh yeah, it's 8 minutes long because Brendan likes to structure it like this and likes to bring back themes like that. And obviously it does owe a lot to like early Dream Theater and early Rush and things like that. But it's also interesting because unlike those bands, it's not like we're changing textures all the time. It's not like, okay, there's a bunch of clean and then we got a bunch of synth and then we got a bunch of this and that. It's not, I mean, obviously we love that too, but it's not what we're doing here. And it's not what we want in like a death metal record, right? So it's like, we're going to keep the heaviness, and like when it's not heavy, it's like atmospheric. But again, it's like the sort of vibe of it is Gutvoid throughout. So trying to like build those structures in different ways with like people always think of death metal as like, it's like it's in your face all the time, but then because of that it has to be subtle, otherwise there's no change at all. So it's like we've got subtleties in terms of like what's happening in the riffage and what the drum beats are doing, even if it's sort of timbrally and like in terms of density, it's like there's a lot of staying the same. And then when you do have these big drops, it's that much more dramatic. But all that to say that like, so it's like I was feeling the structures more this time around because it was so much more comfortable, and like connecting that with the sound that we sort of like become comfortable with as a band on making the first album.
Cool. So you're going to make me jump to my 7th question because you just talked about the song I want to talk about. So that's awesome. So my favorite song on Breathing is absolutely When the Living Dome Opens. All right. And the reason why, and I'm going to just say it outright, it sounds like if Voivod was a death metal band. All right. That's kind of what it reminds me of. Like, and I'm not talking about modern Voivod. I'm talking about like you got to stop maybe at Dimension Hatros, okay? Like that kind of period, and then make it kind of like a death doom band on top of it. So can you kind of talk to me a little bit more about that song? Because you kind of started digging into it, both of you, but like, I feel like prog, doom, death metal, and kind of experimental metal mixed together is a no-no for a lot of bands, but you guys just don't give a shit. Like you just throw it in there, do your thing, make it what it is. And it's the reason why I love Gutvoid and why I want to talk to you a second time, because it's always more interesting. So can you talk about that song a little bit more for me?
Yeah, sure. I want to start. And then,
before you start, Brendan, remind me which song it is. This is like an ongoing thing. My brain like can't. I don't remember the names of any songs. And I'll be like, how does it start? It's like when we play a set, I never know what song we're playing, but I just like know the parts. So remind me, how does it start?
I can't remember what the fake title of it was.
We have fake working titles too. So I'm like, I don't bother learning the titles. Sometimes they get added after I've already recorded.
It's the one. It starts with drums with toms and it's 6/7/6/7. It splits back forth. It's a third track.
Yeah, it's a third song.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Brendan said, there's this huge kind of Dream Theater-ish moment in the middle of the song, like brutal love of Dream Theater. So.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm happy to. How in depth and nerdy do you want me to get on talking about this? Like writing this or whatnot.
Everyone that watches this are music nerds. So
all right, excellent,
fun, man.
Okay, so when I started writing this song, I wanted to do something. I wanted something that was like, first off, I'm like, oh, like demi-lich style kind of riff, which like you can kind of hear like the main riff that kicks in like the first verse is like a pure demi-lich kind of style thing in 7. And the same with the start as well, like kind of like demi-lich, mortiferum, that kind of influence, like, you know, like having like a lead going over with some kind of heavy chords. I actually, and this, Dennis, I haven't told anyone this. You're probably going to be upset to hear it, but I was actually influenced as well by Haken on this track. Because at that point, their single Taurus had come out. And I know I just heard that, and there was a part in that kind of got me thinking as well. So that was kind of the start of it. But then when I started playing around with it, like I was throwing in some on time signatures and stuff, I'm like, oh, like this one's kind of seeming to be a bit more on the proggy techie side, just like by writing it. And I was like, hopefully the guys dig this. Like I know we had kind of on the 4-way split with Murmurations from Twilight Bodies, we had experimented a bit with, you know, some like techier stuff. Like that has like a weird midsection that's like 7, 6, 7, 8 back and forth kind of like time signature stuff. So I knew that like it's not, again, it wouldn't be too outside of our wheelhouse, but this one I was like, this one might be pushing the envelope a little bit, but I just, let's write and see what happens. And I wanted, again, like something very Dream Theater-y in the sense, and even like, you know, like the prog era of Rush, or, you know, they're always prog, but like more in that like, you know, Permanent Waves, Moving Pictures, that kind of era of Rush, where they're parts that are all, like it's all connected, but it kind of flows like it's almost like riff in a way, but they're still connected. Like the two verses are different, but they are still connected. They follow the same kind of harmonic idea. They're both roughly in 7. Same with all 3 choruses are all different, you know, different feels, played differently, but it still follows the same harmonic idea. So it was like wanting to really take that, like that prog idea of, okay, well, every chorus, every verse isn't the same. They're connected, but they're different, which is like such a Rush, Dream Theater,
Sure.
and Haken like kind of thing, you know, which I'm such a sucker for. Like we always joke, and from the start, that like before we were more upfront with the prog influences, we're like, yeah, we're just like a sneaky Rush, Dream Theater cover band in a way, because like a lot of the structures are like the chorus first time around is played, you know, 1 time, then the second time around it's 2 times, and then the last chorus is 3 times, which is like, again, such a Rush, Dream Theater trope, which in this song is exactly that. And then, you know, that middle section, I wanted something that was like, I wanted like a very Dream Theater-y, you know, midsection where it's a bunch of like kind of technical riffs that like are interesting, and like playing with time signatures, and, you know, having a bunch of solos and drum solo. And there's even the one part that to me is like very Planet X-y. It's the one that's like hard to sing, but like it's Planet X-y meets Dream Theater meets Meshuggah, I guess, in a little way as well. You know, and so again, it was a little different for us, but still rooted in us, and kind of the influences that are still kind of in Gutvoid, even if, you know, like I said, a bit more subtle on the other stuff, like the prior stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you know, like I said, there's again, the Intronaut influenced it as well a little bit for the last verse, with the kind of back and forth rhythm stuff, and then just wanted to like for the last chorus really change it up and have it in 5 and have it like halftime, but still like bring it all back. So it's in that prog way, although it's a lot of like different riffs coming at you and a lot of like little tricky time signature things and little changes here and there, it all follows the same thread. It's all foreshadowing earlier themes that come back at the end, and, you know, they're slightly different. It's all weaved together, so it's cohesive, you know. Sure. So that was, sorry, that was a little bit of a diarrhea there, but that's kind of the progenesis of it, and then kind of where my mind was going as I was going through it, and kind of the influences drawn from. And then thankfully I threw it at the guys and everyone was down, so it was like, great, it was perfect. So
Well, it would have crushed my heart if it wasn't on the record. So I'm glad they all dug it, because it's probably right now, honestly, my favorite song by you guys. So
That's fucking awesome. Thank you.
Literally it is. So
so two things. One, that's amazing to hear. Thank you. Because it was one that I wasn't sure how people and fans would take to it. So I'm very happy to hear that it's, positively.
Yeah.
But also now this is just telling me that we should do more proggy stuff in the future. So
hell yeah.
Yeah.
All day long, man. Dennis, you have any feedback on it too as well?
I was going to say, with all those prog influences, one of the things that I consider my job in this band is to just like get some grime on it, like don't make it too clean. And I'm glad that you mentioned Voivod, because one of the things that I love about Voivod, especially that early Voivod, is it is proggy, but it's also it's proggy and it's thrashy, but it's also they're like punk influenced, it's like there's something that's like really grimy and like a little bit loose in like the best way about those early albums. And so I like to bring that a little bit. Like
you can hear it. No, you absolutely can hear it, especially in the drumming. Like the drumming is nasty at points on that song. Like, and the other songs, sometimes they feel a little more controlled, but on that one, you can feel like, okay, this is kind of a complex song. I'm going to put some like dirt and a little bit of spit on it as well too. And that's cool. So
awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, I will say, again, now that we've been playing together and as Dan said, keeping in mind the other guys when writing it, I'm always excited to give the stuff to Dennis and be like, yeah, keep this feel, but do whatever. And it's always great. It's always fantastic. I'm sure Dennis can attest, whenever in the studio, I just have a big stupid grin on my face and drums are being tracked. I'm just it's exciting. So
cool. All right, So I want to talk about a band that I never hear anybody talk about in relation to you, and I feel like the reason why I like the doom style that you do, particularly, is because it reminds me of a band called Ceremonium. I don't know if you guys like them. I don't know if you know who they are. They're a band from New York. They literally put one record out on Fadeless Records, I think in Denmark in 1992. But it's like a legend. It's like a legendary album. All right, and they remind me of if doom was hardcore, because they mix those two elements together. It's like, imagine an early 80s, mid 80s, Northeast hardcore band playing doom metal, and that's what they do. And I think you guys would love it if you haven't heard them before. But literally, it's one record. They have another record that they did recently, 25 years later. But the one that's on Fadeless, from the 90s, is just, it sounds like the doom you make. So what I wanted to ask was, are there hardcore influences in any of the music? I know you're wearing an Unsane shirt, so I'm probably throwing the kettle called black right now. But are there hardcore influences in it? Because I swear to God, sometimes I hear these hardcore elements in your, especially the last couple of records. So.
I mean, for me, yes, obviously. I mean, one of the things that bands like Unsane, it's they're just hitting so hard. It's so physical and so visceral, and it's it's a totally the opposite end of the spectrum from the super quantized triggered sound drums, which it has its place and whatever, but I love the Unsane, just pulverizing, kicking over the drums kind of sound. And I mean, I listen to a lot of punk and hardcore too, so it's definitely something that comes into my playing for sure.
Your drumming, I grew up as a hardcore kid, and I played in hardcore bands. I play in doom and noise bands now, but in my 20s, I was in a pretty well-known on the East Coast band called Grizzle, and we were a hardcore band, a hardcore metal band. We played with a lot of bands. Your drumming style reminds me of a band called Kiss It Goodbye a lot. Just the way you play, because I always felt he was also in a band called Rorschach. He was in a whole bunch of other bands as well too. But you play metal with a very kind of hardcore style, and that's why that's why I love what you do, because you're not afraid to play a backbeat. And a lot of metal guys always have to be up front playing a million goddamn beats at a second, and sometimes when it just needs to be heavy, or that when it needs to be complex. And that's the way that's the kind of drumming I love. So not Brendan, not to have like, oh, it's the Dennis and Clint show right now or anything. But like,
He's
no,
great. I agree.
no, I'm so glad that he's here because I didn't know he was going to be here, and I get to talk to him about some stuff too. So this is cool as hell. No, so I appreciate it.
Awesome.
But,
Well,
you know,
thank you.
yeah, but when you play, is that done intentionally? Because I think when they bring you the riffs, you might even change the arrangements a little bit to them while they're doing. Like I could feel the vibe of like when you're playing, like you're like pushing it into a different direction.
Yeah,
where-
absolutely. Like there's sometimes, like Brendan will have parts that are like structured, and I'll be like, this section I don't want to be blasting here. This one I want a backbeat. And it's like this one, like this we're going to go into halftime here, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's like, no, we're going back to the original. But yeah, we definitely like, I'll feel it, and it'll be like, this is what is making sense for me here with the way I play and things like that. And yeah, bring my influences into it. I'm like, this needs a bit more suicidal tendencies, or something. And he's like, I wouldn't have made that connection maybe, but yeah, I definitely have that kind of like mixing that attack in with these like sometimes more complex structures and sometimes more doomy structures, and having that like hard hitting, just sort of, and like I say, a little bit grimy, a little bit messy sometimes, and that's something I've always loved mixing in a bit.
Cool. And then Brendan, I'm going to ask you the other side of the question because you're one of the guitarists here. So this is the first time after hearing 2 or 3 records with you guys, EPs, albums, whatever you want to call them, all right, where there are 2 distinct guitar tones. Like in the last record, it kind of more felt like it was a blending of tones. But this is the first time, like, I can hear guitar A and guitar B. I don't know which goddamn one it is. All right. I'm like, because I don't know you guys well enough, but one of them is it's got a lot of like saturation and verbiness to it. And then the other one is just like you were talking about, like old school, disgusting Finnish death doom. Like it's not the HM like death metal buzzsaw tone, but it's nasty and dirty. So was it more intentional this time to have those 2 distinct tones on this EP?
I don't know if it was more intentional. Like, in all honesty, it's more getting some tones that just sound good together. If I, to be honest, like, it's sad to see how the sausage is made here. I wish I could be like, I was like super intentional. No, it's just like, this sounds good with, since I'm a lefty, I'm the left track. And then Dan's the right track because he's a righty. That's just how we've always done it. So that you can know that. But yeah, it was more just getting a tone that like sounded good with my guitar, good with Dan's guitar. And then together kind of just made a good, like with this EP, we wanted to sound a bit more, like a bit more organic, not like super overly polished or anything, but still wanted to have like a good, like beefy, crunchy kind of tone overall on the guitars and bass. So happy to hear that it works and it makes that, but it's cool hearing that you're able to kind of get that distinctness, which is, I think, very beneficial because a lot of the times Dan and I are playing, if it's, same riffs, but maybe like we're harmonizing or slightly different stuff. Like there's a few times when he and I are doing totally different things, to give that kind of King Crimson-y vibe, so that's cool. And just to add to the last thing that we were talking about with Dennis, like kind of adding his own touch, I just want to, one really cool example that came up from this EP, on the song For We Are Many, in the second verse, when I wrote it, it was just a straight blast beat, but Dennis came and was like, no, we should do this kind of like syncopated kind of thing. I think it was even, I can't remember if it was in studio or if it was when we were kind of doing pre-production for it, but like you came with that idea and it was like, this is fantastic. Yes. And like, I never would have thought of that. But it's so good. It's like, and it's interesting because it throws the riff off kind of in a really interesting way. And even like, when I write it and I'm like, I have it in this like preconceived kind of feel. And like Dennis said, sometimes it's like, it should stay. Sometimes it should change. But this was like, it was like, oh, this is so cool. Cause it kind of makes it feel a little off kilter, but like has this cool interplayed rhythm on the drums with respect to kind of what's going on with the guitar and with the vocals as well. It's one of my favorite parts in that song and on the EP. And so I just wanted to make sure that, because I still tip my hat to Dennis on that and many other ideas that he's brought.
Very cool. So let's talk about the record label, because I think Blood Harvest is a really interesting label because they sign so many different styles of bands. They're not afraid to have like you and a raw black metal band and a proggier band and more of a rocky kind of, or Jesus, there's, and to me, like some of their bands even have like death rock elements in it. It's like, it's just crazy like what they do. What makes it special and why do you continually work with them? I'm just kind of interested in what makes the Sauce great working with them.
Yeah, I mean, so when we put out the Astral Bestiary EP, like Rodrigo reached out to us like maybe a week after it was out and just was like, hey, like, this is awesome. I think you guys have like potential, like, would you want to work together? And, like we, Dan and I hadn't done anything in really the death metal realm. I mean, the last death metal thing we did was our first band, which was from 2007. And like, that didn't count. This was like the first foray kind of into like death metal as it is present day, especially in like Death Doomier stuff. And so we didn't like, it wasn't like we knew the label prior or anything like that. And we started to talk to him and he was, great guy. Seemed to really dig us. Interesting label as well, like with respect to kind of the variety of bands on it. And other bands who like had, kind of had their start there as well. Like I know Tomb Mold, I think their first album on Blood Harvest, and Bloodspore on there too. And we're like big fans of those guys, and they're good buds. And it was just like I think just going from there, and then working with him has been fantastic. Every release looks great. Every release has like come out, gotten good press, all of that. Like it's been really great. So just keeping going with it and just like enjoying all the physicals and the relationship and all that. So that's it's kind of
they made the yellow T-shirt that I demanded.
Yeah.
When we got that shirt design, we're like, oh, we should do it in a couple of colors. I'm like, yellow. We're making a bright yellow T-shirt. And the band was like, really? And I was like, do it. And they sent it and they made it. And we saw someone wearing it in person at our last show. And I was like, guys, everybody come. The guys wear the yellow shirt.
Yeah, that dude came from, he was from Saskatchewan.
Oh, wow.
Incredible.
And he came to like, I think see a couple shows in Montreal and then came to, it was when we were playing with Tomb Mold. It was like, amazing to see a guy in the piss yellow shirt.
It's the best shirt. It's the best shirt.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Probably two people who have it, him and me, but still.
Hey,
they made it, right? So I'll forever be thankful to the label for that.
That's cool.
Indulging me.
Awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about the last record as well too, because to me they're very distinctly different. Maybe to not everyone, but to me they're very distinctly different. And the reason why is I feel like the previous full length is a lot more clean in tone. It's a lot more kind of pure death metal. Like I don't know how else to say it. Like there's doom moments, there's proggy moments, but overall it feels like a late 90s, early 2000 death metal record to me, where it's like precisely clean tones, very preciseness, and then there's some ugliness thrown in. Where I feel like now you're kind of, like I said, we were already talking about this, mixing everything together and kind of having, it's not a I don't give a shit attitude. It's the we're going to do what we want to do. And if it sounds cool, it's going on the record. But going from that record a couple years ago to now, how do you now, Brennan, I'm going to ask you because, your other partner in crime that's not here today, I didn't get to talk with, we can't bring in it either. But how do you feel the band has sonically changed over that time? That's kind of an interest point of mine. So,
yeah, that's a great question. I mean, barring the stuff we've kind of already talked about of like being, more as a band together, kind of knowing everyone's strengths, weaknesses, interests, and like kind of thinking of those in mind when writing. like I think the jump from Durance to this EP was a bit like sonically was a bit, if you want to go like say production wise, we kind of wanted something like, even though Durance is like it's definitely more polished, like we got it, it's mixed by Otso from Crips and mastered from Marston, like professionals who are doing this stuff, who every album they do sounds incredible. To with this, like the guys threw the idea of like, hey Brennan, like why don't you try just mixing and mastering it? It's an EP, it's an experiment. And so I was like, yeah, like I could do that. I'm by no means a professional. I just did it at my home studio. It's my first time, working with real drums rather than, all the other stuff I've done as a superior drummer.
Sure.
It came with its own challenges, but was exciting. But it was perfect because it was like we wanted to go in being like, well, let's not have this super polished. Let's have this a bit more raw, a bit more organic. Again, playing around with, the overall feel sound wise, as well as, kind of going with, the theme, like, changing things up a little bit. Maybe that's, subconsciously Dennis was getting me to put a little bit of that grime on there more than normal. And then I guess sonically from a, not production wise, but maybe from like an instrumentation wise perspective, Durance for the most part was, as Dennis kind of alluded to, like written before like Dennis and Justin joined the band proper. Like, or at least like most of the songs were kind of, if not fully fleshed out, like kind of done. Like I think only Skeletal Glyph was written kind of once we were as a full band. And so, I think with that album, although it's still rooted in Gutvoid, I think it still, captures kind of the idea we're going for generally. It didn't quite have that, we were going to play these songs live kind of sense. And I say that like it's still stuff going forward is still going to have, plenty of textures and stuff where it's like, well, we can't reproduce this fully live, but we'll figure out like what to do. But that might be a play in it. Whereas this EP and going forward, it's like, well, no, like we are, like Gutvoid is the four of us. It's not just, Dan and I putting something together and being like, well, let's see what happens. It's the four of us, and it's the four of us with our strengths, weaknesses, and planning on playing some of these songs live. And so I think that also kind of plays in with respect to kind of maybe the instrumentation, maybe the types of riffs or the types of feels that are kind of going into them. I'd be lying if I said it was a giant leap between Durance and this EP. I think again, like this EP's a little bit of an experiment to see, like, test the waters on, maybe a bit more prog, maybe like leaning more towards these influences versus that. But like the material that we've written so far for the next album, still sounds like, I'd say, a happy marriage between the two.
Sure.
So although there are, at least from, my, and, again, I'm kind of biased. I'm in the middle of it. I can't like objectively look, but like from a subjective kind of standpoint, although they are, they're different. I think they are, it's so cliche, but, evolutions on the path of, of finding our like exactly what our sound is. And I think we're getting closer and closer. I still think that it's still rooted in that same kind of idea that we wanted to go for from the get-go. But maybe it is that we're just, again, because we are a full unit, it's influencing even subconsciously the way that the songs are kind of presenting themselves, both from a songwriting standpoint, but also from a sonic kind of standpoint as well. I can say with the next album, production-wise, it will probably lean more towards Durance. It'll be more of that like professional, like I'm not going to do it all. I'll do what I did last time, like, get a bunch of tones or whatnot, but then send it off to the real folk who will mix and master properly.
Gotcha. Don't sell yourself short. This EP is phenomenal. So just go for that. Yeah. Dennis, so I want to kind of talk about the rhythm section as well too. I feel like on this EP, you and the bass player are kind of locked in a groove, and it almost feels like you play off of each other. Is that a true statement off these four songs, or was it more of just kind of a live thing? Because I hear him kind of speed up and slow down a bit when you do the opposite. Like it's kind of like this mixture of just great locked in rhythmic tempos.
Well, I mean, we definitely like have developed that kind of rapport by playing live. Like when we're rehearsing, like the four of us together, when we're playing live, you know, Justin's back there with me, and we're always just like feeding off each other. Like I listen to the guitars and whatever, but really I'm locking in with Justin. That's, it's a real classic rhythm section in that regard. Recording wise, however, if that's happening, I give all the credit to Justin there because I recorded these with a click and with guitar scratch tracks.
Okay.
So it was like the first thing we recorded was the drums, and the bass was not done yet. So like, I mean, I definitely, like, with the riffs in mind and the shapes of the songs in mind, I was like, yeah, we're going to push and pull a little bit here, and we're going to do this, and we're going to fall out of time here, and this and that. So, and then I'm like, here, Justin, now you got to follow this. And, but I think the fact that we had, sort of developed that push and pull, and we've recorded everything with a click, but we don't play live with a click. And so I think that the push and pull has come naturally live. And then so like doing that against the click is also something that sort of comes a bit naturally after that as well. And then, Justin then responding to me in that way becomes more natural as well.
Then Justin deserves a big applaud because he definitely he did a really cool bass player thing in death metal that doesn't happen a lot, where it happens a lot in prog. Yes, that kind of give and take, like know when to put it on heavy, know when to put it on soft, when to pull back, when to like really play, when to follow the guitars, when to follow the drums. It was really cool. So that's awesome.
I'm gonna I don't want to speak for Justin here, but I will say that one thing that Justin and I have in common is that we're both, I'm going to bring another non-death metal thing, we're both massive Soundgarden fans.
Okay, awesome.
And a lot of the time when I'm playing like the doomy stuff, I'm thinking of like the sludgier Soundgarden stuff. And so, I mean, if you want to talk about a band that like pushes and pulls in an amazing way, it's like Soundgarden does that. So maybe we just have that both have that,
Well, I'll tell you something right now. My band that I'm going to be recording with in a couple of weeks with, we're going to be doing a cover of Beyond the Wheel because that's my favorite goddamn Soundgarden song ever. So like you just made me smile when you used the word Soundgarden, because yes, the rhythm section in Soundgarden makes Kim magical. Like that's what happens there. Like, yeah, Chris Cornell is an amazing singer, but the rhythm section is what makes that band. And I absolutely agree. No, awesome. Thank you. Next thing I kind of want to talk about is, so the record's it's pretty goddamn new. Like, let's be honest. Like, I'm sure you haven't gotten a lot of feedback yet from it, but have you gotten anything that's literally been shocking in a positive manner or a negative manner that, like, review-wise, you were like, oh, I never thought of it this way, or, oh, goddamn, yeah, maybe we are doing that and I don't realize it. Like,
yeah, I mean, truth be told, and most of the feedback we've got has been positive, which is great. I think, there has been a ton of stuff. I think I saw one review that was not very favorable, but it was from the same person who has given us not favorable reviews in the past. So it's just like, yeah, it's just not for them, which is totally cool. But the people who have,
I wrote the review. Sorry, I was just not happy.
I didn't want to name you, but yeah. But I guess the things that are surprising in the reviews that we're getting is that people are down for the kind of like more proggier focused stuff. Like I said, like I was a little, I remember when Dan and I, so Dan and I collaborated on the first and last tracks. And on the last one, Shodar, Dan and I wrote that. It was the first thing we wrote after the album. And it was like, it's super Rush influenced, especially like Power Windows era. Like we just like ripped off the Big Money essentially, with like a big.
That. Not everybody's gonna be like, oh, okay, that's what it is.
But also like there's like a King Crimson part in the middle. There's like one of the riffs sounds like extremely Dream Theater, and we were just like, I remember like we wrote this and I was like, I wonder if like we're gonna actually do this song, or if this was just like one that we wrote just to get something out of our system, but it's like we won't actually use it. And then when, we brought everybody and everyone agreed that this is, let's do it and let's go with it. And we did, and people are liking it. And same with like Living Dome Opens, which again, like is more that like more technical prog, but still like super proggy. That's been a very pleasant surprise. I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, I hope people don't just listen to side A and forget side B, because side A is like, I think a bit more safe in the Gutvoid realm. It's like, okay, yeah, like super death doomy, death metal-y, like it sounds like what you'd expect, where I think the other two are a little less so. And so hearing people, like yourself, like enjoy it is like a fantastic. It's like the greatest, compliment a musician can get, is that someone else likes the stuff you put out, which is, or even like any artist, like it is fantastic. But that's been like a pleasant surprise. And again, it's for better or for worse, it's kind of given us, the keys to unlock the proggier doors going forward.
Cool. No,
Yeah.
awesome.
I feel like the death metal purist thing is dying a little bit, and I welcome its death. Like it's great, Like, nobody's like, it's death metal or nothing. It's like that's not really the mindset anymore. If it ever really has been, it's always just been a few people pushing that, and everybody else is like, well, I don't know any metalheads who don't listen to like a million different genres,
right.
And most of them listen to at least a little bit of prog, at least a little bit of Rush, So it's like when we sneak it in there, most people are fine with it. It's not downright happy,
That's funny, because that was going to be the final question I was going to ask, which was, do you really feel you're a death metal band anymore? And that's funny that you said it before you let me do it. But like, do you feel like, because I don't think you are. I think that's just one of the elements now. Like it's not the focus of the band anymore.
Do you want to go? You go, Dennis. You start.
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on genre organization anyways. I mean, it depends how you're thinking about death metal, right? It's like people are like, oh, there's a bazillion different subgenres of extreme metal. You got death metal, you got doom death, and you got blackened death, and you got black metal, and you got crusty black, and you got this, and it goes forever, and you got death grind, and you got crusty grind, and then you've got porno grind, goes forever. And then some people are like, just go take a step back, and it's like it's all metal, or it's at least it's got like heavy metal, extreme metal, whatever. Like I like the genre labels, but not so much as organizing principles, more just like as adjectives, Like if somebody tells me a band is a black and death band, I'm not like, oh, they can only play with other black and death bands. I'm like, oh, I'm imagining elements of black metal and death metal. I'm like, I like descriptions, It's like there's nothing wrong with describing things. But then when it comes to like these like big questions, like, are you death metal? I'm like, yeah, sure. It doesn't like, I would say yes in the same, but I like to think of like extreme metal or death metal in this like very broad sense. Like, so metal is super into genre classification, or at least genre description, as I like to think about it. Something like jazz, is not. It's like you got 100 years of music that goes from like Dixieland to big band to like fusion and free jazz, and it's like that's all jazz. And it's like the stuff that's being made like by electric like bands in the 80s is like nothing sonically. It's like it's so far away from what's happening from like the Count Basie band, but it's all jazz, So it's like if we take that sort of same principle to metal, it's like, okay, maybe what Deep Purple is doing in the 70s doesn't really sound like what Napalm Death is doing in the 90s, and doesn't sound like what Cenotaph is doing in the 2000s. It's like, but it's all metal somehow, and it's like you can subdivide it and describe it in all these different ways, which is great to help you find stuff, but it's like in terms of categorization, doesn't really matter,
Cool. Thoughts, Brennan?
Yeah, that was very well said, and I agree as well. Like I think, and I'm the same. Like I love the breakdown of the subgenres of subgenres, and one of my favorite quote unquote party tricks to non-metal heads is like saying, okay, well, let me tell you about metal. Like here's the umbrella, it's metal, but there's a lot of sub umbrellas, and like they all interweave. But that's the thing, is like they really do all interweave, and there's going to be influence that flows through so much stuff. Like Cannibal Corpse. What's Cannibal Corpse? Death metal. Like they're like one of the godfathers, one of the pillars of death metal. But like Alex Webster's a huge Rush fan, and a Symphony X fan, and like you look at some of those riffs, like these are like techie riffs, and it's like, oh, but these are like proggy riffs, and like, oh, like this riff has quintuplet subdivisions in it. Like, wait, like is Cannibal Corpse like they're just like a caveman riff death metal band? Like there's a lot of thought put into the song.
And also
structure.
the whole like caveman riff death metal band came afterwards. It's sort of like this retroactive application of like, oh no, this is the simplified death metal. It's like, yeah, but you're simplifying it after it's already been established as this like super progressive and like hybridized form that's always mixed a million things, you know, like Morbid Angel, and like right back to the beginning, they were always mixing stuff. And then like Napalm Death, when Napalm Death was like grind, and then they're death metal, and then they're doing all these things, and it's like, you know, it's always been like death metal has always been a genre that incorporates a lot of other genres, and it's just that, like, it does it in sort of less obvious ways a lot of the time, but it's always been that way.
Oh yeah. No, I agree. Yeah,
and like not to kind of veer a little bit, but I think it's part of the great richness that is death metal, is that like there's, I mean, sure, some people gatekeep death metal as like, no, it has to be this, but no, really, like there's so much differentiation in metal. Like go on, you know, Metal Archives, you know, and just look at like there's so many different types of metal, but like it's all in the Metal Archives, because like as Dennis said, you step back, it's all metal. But death metal, I think especially, really allows for a lot of different influences to get in there. And again, as Dennis said, sometimes they're on the nose, sometimes they're a little less so. But I think it really still is it's part and parcel to what death metal is, or at least what death metal has become, if you want to put it that way. So with respect to like us, like, yeah, like when people ask me, you know, like last night I was, you know, at a party and someone was like, so I hear you're in a band, like you do screamo vocals. What's that all like? I'm like, well, not screamo, they're death metal vocals. You're like, oh, like, so like, what kind of band is it? I'm like, well, it's a death metal band. They're like, what kind are we talking? Like, you know, and then it's like, well, you know, again, like death metal's so broad, but it's like, well, it's like the easiest, I always go like, you know, the easiest thing is like, it's kind of like there's death doom elements, but there's also like Finnish death metal, but then there's also like prog stuff in there. And it's like all kind of like mashed together with like absolutely other influences that are in there, less so, maybe even subconsciously, you know. And so, although it's like, again, I think it's fun, like we could definitely subdivide ourselves. Like we always, not joke, but like we always say, like we are, if we're a death doom band, we're a death doom band, not a doom death band. Yeah. You know? Because there's a big distinction there.
Right.
And, you know, and so we still have a lot of death doom influence, but we have a lot of like straight up death metal influence, but we also have a lot of like prog influence, and like there's like a hint of black metal influence at times. It's and again, like there's grind influences, there's, you know, rock influences, it's a lot. And so, you know, again, like maybe this is a wishy-washy answer to your original question, which is like, are we death metal or are we something else? It's like, well, I think we're death metal by virtue of the fact that death metal has so many, you know, it's so multifaceted, you know, you can look at it, it's a many-sided coin that you get to look at. And so if we want to delve deeper, like definitely we can subdivide and get into a specific category that like maybe us and a handful of other bands are really capturing kind of the same sound or vibe. But then again, like you could probably look at that list and be like, well, yes, but you know, that band doesn't have this element, whereas this band does. And like we share between both of them, but not all the same. Like it's an odd Venn diagram that you could create from all that. So like death metal, yeah, we're like, it's just how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go, I guess. Like, and we could definitely like get to like some like very pinpointed kind of possibly even unique kind of identifier, which like, you know, again, like as the three of us are all wearing glasses, we're all huge geeks in metal, like we would love to do, you know?
No, and that's fair. And that's what I'm trying to say is that's what I love about this is, yes, you are death metal adjacent, okay? And like, that's the best way, and that is the best way to be. You mix all these great elements into what in essence is a death metal band. So I'm so glad you both kind of said it that way to me, because that's what I wanted to hear was like, yes, we're death metal, but we're not death metal. But yes, we're death metal, because that's music in 2024, right? The really good bands challenge you. The bands, you have your favorites from the 90s and the 2000s, but the new bands like yourself, and yeah, you're new to me, okay? Like, I'm 52 years old. You're new to me. Like, you're my next journey. So like I said, like, and I appreciate that so very much. And with that, I'm going to say thank you again for doing this. You guys have been awesome as always. I'm sure we're going to do this again. Like, I love talking to you guys. Every time we do this, these become long. We did the same thing last time. We went into these really weird rabbit holes, and I love it. So again, thank you for doing this. The new EP is amazing. Can't wait for the new record to come out. This is Clint from the Doorwayto, hanging out with Dennis and Brendan. And I just want to say thank you for doing this again, and look forward to speaking with you guys next time.
Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's fantastic. And looking forward to the next one as well. We'll go even longer.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You guys have a good night.
You as well.
You too. Thanks again.